The morning sun filtered through the crystal chandeliers of La Maison Dorée, casting prism-like rainbows across the pristine white tablecloths. Thomas Blackwell, owner of Blackwell International Enterprises and 37th on the Forbes Billionaires list, sat alone at his usual corner table. His steel-grey hair was immaculately styled, and his custom-tailored Brioni suit fit his athletic frame perfectly. At 52, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had conquered the world twice over. "Your usual, Mr. Blackwell?" asked the maître d', hovering at a respectful distance. Thomas barely glanced up from his financial report. "Non, aujourd'hui je voudrais quelque chose de différent. Une omelette aux truffes et un café noir, s'il vous plaît." His French flowed with a peculiar accent that had always puzzled the staff. Not quite Parisian, not quite provincial, something else entirely. The maître d' hesitated, his smile faltering. Like most of the staff, he recognized the language but couldn't quite parse the billionaire's unique pronunciation and cadence. It was an open secret at La Maison Dorée that when Mr. Blackwell spoke French, they nodded politely and brought him his usual breakfast. "Of course, sir, right away," he replied in English, retreating toward the kitchen. Thomas sighed, returning to his report. He knew they hadn't understood, they never did. His French, learned in a small village in rural Corsica during a formative year of his youth, was authentic but distinctive, reflecting the regional dialect of his elderly tutor, Madame Beaumont. It was a private disappointment that in this high-end restaurant, supposedly known for its French cuisine and ambiance, no one ever truly understood him when he spoke the language closest to his heart. In the kitchen, chaos reigned as the morning rush reached its peak. Chef Marcel barked orders, while line cooks scrambled to keep up with the demand. By the sink, 23-year-old Gabrielle L. Jackson was struggling through her third day as a dishwasher, her hands already raw from the hot water and industrial soap. Her dark curls were tucked haphazardly under a hairnet, and the bags under her warm brown eyes spoke of sleepless nights. "Jackson, we need you on the floor." "Sophia called in sick," the floor manager shouted over the kitchen din. Ella froze, her stomach knotting with anxiety. "Sir, I haven't been trained for serving yet. It's putting plates down and taking orders, not rocket science," he replied dismissively, tossing her a clean apron. "Table 8 needs attention, and the VIP in the corner will need his usual breakfast." Ella quickly dried her hands and changed her apron, heart racing. She needed this job desperately. The stack of past due notices in her tiny apartment grew taller each day, and her student loans weren't going to defer themselves again. After her mother's long illness had drained their modest savings, and with her young brother's college tuition payments looming, Ella couldn't afford to lose this position. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed her apron and pushed through the kitchen doors into the dining room. The elegant space was intimidating, crystal, silver, and old money. Elle felt painfully out of place as she navigated to table 8, where she took her first order with trembling hands but a warm smile. "The VIP next," whispered a passing server, nodding toward the corner. Ella approached Thomas Blackwell's table with trepidation, having recognized him immediately from countless magazine covers and news segments. He didn't look up as she approached, absorbed in the documents before him. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. "May I get you anything else?" Thomas looked up, momentarily struck by something in her gentle voice. For a brief second their eyes met, and Elle felt a strange connection, like recognition, though they'd never met. "Non, merci," he replied automatically in French, then added with a hint of resignation, "Je vais prendre mon petit déjeuner habituel puisque personne ne comprend jamais ce que je demande réellement." Without thinking, Elle responded, "Une omelette aux truffes et un café noir, c'est bien cela, monsieur? Votre accent est corsican, n'est-ce pas? De la région de Bonifacio, peut-être?" Thomas's head snapped up, his documents forgotten. His piercing blue eyes widened as he stared at Elle, genuinely startled for perhaps the first time in decades. The young waitress had not only understood his French, but had identified the specific regional accent that had eluded language professors and diplomats alike. "Comment connaissez-vous cet accent?" he asked, his voice dropping to an almost intimate tone. Elle's cheeks flushed slightly. "Ma mère était l'assistante d'un professeur de linguistique spécialisé dans les dialectes méditerranéens. J'ai grandi en écoutant des enregistrements de différents accents régionaux." The billionaire's stoic facade cracked, revealing a genuine smile that transformed his entire face. For a moment he looked years younger, boyish almost. Other diners glanced over, surprised to see the notoriously serious businessman looking so animated. "Please," he said, switching to English and gesturing to the chair across from him. "Sit with me for a moment." Ella glanced nervously at the floor manager, who was watching with narrowed eyes. "I'm sorry, sir, I don't think I'm allowed to—" "I insist," Thomas said, his tone making it clear that he was accustomed to getting his way. "Just for a minute." Reluctantly, Elle perched on the edge of the chair, hyper-aware of the whispers their interaction was generating among the other staff. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" Thomas asked, leaning forward slightly. "It's not just the accent recognition. Your pronunciation is flawless." "My mother was a single parent who worked for Professor Daniel Hughes at the university," Ella explained hesitantly. "He specialized in Mediterranean language dialects. When she couldn't afford childcare, I'd sit in his office listening to recordings. I had a knack for mimicry, apparently." Before Thomas could respond, the floor manager appeared at their table, his smile tight and artificial. "I apologize for the intrusion, Mr. Blackwell. Jackson is new and still learning our protocols." Thomas didn't even glance at the manager. "She's doing excellently. I'd like her to be my server exclusively when I dine here." The manager's expression flickered between confusion and calculation. "Of course, sir, whatever you prefer." As the manager retreated, Thomas turned his attention back to Elle. "You mentioned your mother in the past tense." Ella's smile dimmed. "She passed away last year. Cancer." "I'm sorry," Thomas said, with surprising sincerity. "And now you're working here, trying to keep afloat," Elle admitted. "Student loans, my brother's tuition, medical bills, the usual American dream." She offered a self-deprecating smile as she stood. "I should get your order in, Mr. Blackwell." "Thomas," he corrected, surprising himself. "And I'd like to continue our conversation, perhaps when your shift ends." Ella hesitated, suddenly aware of how this might appear to others, the billionaire and the waitress. "I don't think that would be appropriate." "A business proposition?" he clarified, his mind already racing ahead. "I have need of someone with your linguistic talents." Before Elle could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. A striking woman with platinum blonde hair and a designer suit was arguing with the host. Thomas's expression immediately closed off, his warm demeanor evaporating. "That would be Veronica, my ex-wife," he said flatly. "Perhaps we can continue this another time." As Ella retreated to the kitchen, she could feel Veronica's cold gaze following her. Something told her that her life had just become considerably more complicated, though she couldn't possibly imagine just how dramatic the change would be. The remainder of Elle's shift passed in a blur. News of her interaction with Thomas Blackwell spread through the restaurant staff like wildfire, generating a mixture of envy and speculation. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept returning to the billionaire's enigmatic smile and his mention of a business proposition. "So what did the Ice King want?" asked Matteo, one of the line cooks, as Ella collected an order. "Ice King?" "Blackwell, that's what everyone calls him. Guy's notorious for being cold as Antarctica, never smiles, barely speaks to the staff, tips well but makes grown men cry during business meetings." Matteo leaned closer. "Word is he hasn't had a real conversation with anyone since his divorce 3 years ago." Elle frowned, remembering the warm exchange they'd shared. "He seemed perfectly pleasant to me." "That's what makes it weird," Matteo replied. "Anton's been serving him for 2 years and hasn't gotten more than 10 words in English, plus whatever that French mumbling is." When Ella's shift finally ended at 3 p.m., she was surprised to find a sleek black Bentley waiting outside the employee exit. The chauffeur, an older gentleman with kind eyes, approached her. "Miss Jackson, I'm Howard, Mr. Blackwell's driver. He asked me to give you this." He handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a business card with Thomas's private number handwritten on the back, along with a note. "I have a proposal that might interest you. Call if you wish to hear it. TB." Elle slipped the card into her pocket, unsure what to make of it. Her practical side warned her to be cautious. Billionaires didn't typically offer opportunities to struggling waitresses without expecting something in return. But there had been something in Thomas's eyes when they spoke French together, a vulnerability that contradicted his ruthless reputation. Back in her cramped studio apartment in a less desirable part of town, Elle collapsed onto her second-hand sofa. The space was small but meticulously clean. decorated with treasured books instead of expensive furnishings. Her younger brother Jamie's smiling face beamed from framed photos on the wall, the reason she worked 3 jobs and still barely made ends meet. At 17, he was a brilliant student with a full scholarship to his first-choice university starting next fall, but textbooks and housing would fall to Elle. The phone rang, jolting her from her thoughts. "Hey, Ellie," Jamie's voice came through, sounding strained despite his attempt at cheerfulness. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. "Nothing major. Just there's this summer program at the university before freshman year starts. It would give me a head start on some advanced courses." Ella closed her eyes, already knowing what was coming. "How much?" "3,000, but I didn't expect you to—" "I'll figure something out," she promised, though she had no idea how. Her credit cards were maxed, and she'd already sold anything of value. After they hung up, Ella found herself staring at Thomas Blackwell's business card. $3,000 meant nothing to someone like him. The thought made her reach for her phone. He answered on the second ring. "Blackwell." "Mr. Blackwell, it's L. Jackson, from La Maison Dorée." There was a pause, then his voice warmed. "Ah, Mademoiselle Jackson, I was hoping you'd call." 30 minutes later, Elle found herself seated in the private lounge of the Blackwell Tower, 52 floors above the city. The space was elegantly understated, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking sunset view. Thomas arrived precisely on time, now dressed in a more casual but equally expensive outfit, dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that somehow made him look more approachable. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the plush seating area. "Would you like something to drink?" "Just water, thank you." As they settled, Elle noticed how different he seemed in this environment, more relaxed, yet somehow more intense. His eyes hadn't left her face since she'd arrived. "I'll be direct," Thomas began. "I'm preparing for a series of negotiations with a Corsican shipping consortium. Their principal negotiator is an older gentleman who refuses to use English and speaks a very specific regional dialect, the same one you recognized this morning." Ella nodded, beginning to understand. "And your regular translators can't follow the dialect?" "Precisely. I've tried 7 different translators, all supposedly fluent in French, and none of them could keep up with the nuances. These negotiations are worth billions, and I can't afford miscommunications. So you want me to—" "What? Translate for you?" Thomas smiled. "Initially, yes. I'd like you to accompany me to preliminary meetings as my cultural and linguistic consultant. If that goes well, I'd consider offering you a more permanent position." Elle's heart raced at the possibility. "And the compensation?" $20,000 for the first meeting, which takes place next Friday in New York. All expenses covered, of course. If we proceed to a permanent arrangement, we can discuss an appropriate salary and benefits package. Elle nearly choked on her water. $20,000 would solve not just Jamie's summer program, but many of her other financial problems as well. "This seems too good to be true," she said carefully. "Why me? There must be professional translators with more credentials." Thomas leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Because you didn't just understand the words, Elle. You understood me. Do you know how long it's been since someone genuinely understood what I was saying in that dialect? 34 years. Something in his voice made Elle believe him. "I'd need time off from the restaurant, already arranged. I spoke with the owner this afternoon." Ella raised an eyebrow. "That's presumptuous." "It's efficient," Thomas countered, though a flicker of awareness crossed his face. "Though perhaps I should have consulted you first. Old habits." The conversation shifted to logistics, and Ella found herself warming to Thomas as they spoke. Behind his businessman exterior was a surprisingly thoughtful person with a dry sense of humor that emerged when he relaxed. Their discussion flowed naturally between English and French, sometimes mid-sentence, in a way Ella hadn't experienced since her mother's death. As their meeting concluded, Thomas walked her to the elevator. "My assistant will contact you tomorrow with the details. In the meantime, I've taken the liberty of transferring an advance to your account." "You don't even have my account information," Ella protested. Thomas gave her a look that reminded her exactly who she was dealing with. "I'm Thomas Blackwell. Finding a bank account number is hardly challenging." Before Elle could decide whether to be impressed or disturbed, the elevator arrived. As the doors closed, Thomas added, "Au revoir, Mademoiselle Jackson. J'attends avec impatience notre prochaine rencontre." Elle's response was automatic. "À bientôt, Monsieur Blackwell. Le plaisir est partagé." The door closed on his surprised smile. When she arrived home, Elle discovered that Thomas's advance was $50,000, nearly 5 times what she earned in a year at her various jobs. Attached was a simple note: "For your brother's education and your peace of mind. Consider it an investment in our working relationship. TB." She sat on her sofa, staring at her bank app in disbelief. The practical part of her brain wondered what she was getting herself into, while another part, the part that had been drowning in worry for so long, finally took a deep breath. What she couldn't know was that across town, Veronica Blackwell was sitting in her penthouse, scrolling through the photos her private investigator had taken of Elle entering Blackwell Tower. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against her wine glass as she made a phone call. "I need everything you can find on a Gabrielle Jackson," she said coolly. "Thomas seems to have found a new pet project, and I want to know why." New York City welcomed Elle with relentless rain and towering skyscrapers that made her feel smaller than ever. The luxurious hotel suite Thomas had arranged for her was larger than her entire apartment, with amenities she'd only seen in magazines. She spent her first evening alternating between reviewing her notes on Corsican dialects and staring in disbelief at the bathtub, large enough to swim in. The week since Thomas's proposition had passed in a whirlwind. She'd resigned from La Maison Dorée, though the owner mysteriously insisted on keeping her position open, paid off Jamie's summer program fees, cleared her most pressing debts, and found herself standing in Bergdorf Goodman while Thomas's personal shopper selected appropriate attire for international business meetings. The entire experience felt surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. Only her daily calls with Jamie kept her grounded, though she hadn't told him the full story yet, unsure how to explain her sudden change in circumstances. Friday morning arrived with a knock on her hotel door. Thomas stood in the hallway, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than a year's rent for her apartment. "Prête pour votre premier jour en tant que ma conseillère linguistique?" he asked, his eyes taking in her appearance with approval. Elle smoothed her new navy dress, grateful for the personal shopper's guidance. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, switching to English, "though I'm still not entirely sure what I've gotten myself into." During the limousine ride to the meeting location, Thomas briefed her on what to expect. Jean-Claude Mathieu is 78 years old and has controlled the Corsican shipping routes for nearly 40 years. He refuses to conduct business in English and takes pride in using regional expressions that confuse most translators. Thomas handed her a folder. "These are the terms I'm hoping to negotiate. We need access to his ports for our Mediterranean expansion." Ella scanned the documents, noting the complexity of the deal. "And what exactly should I do during this meeting?" "Just translate accurately. I'll handle the negotiation." "No," Ella said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I mean, what should I call you? How should I position myself? If I'm supposedly your cultural consultant, I should know these things." Thomas studied her with new interest. "You're right. Address me as Thomas in English, Monsieur Blackwell, when speaking French to Mathieu. You're a valued advisor who specializes in cross-cultural business relations." The meeting took place in a private dining room at Le Bernardin, one of the city's most exclusive French restaurants. Jean-Claude Mathieu was already seated when they arrived, accompanied by a younger man introduced as his grandson, Philippe. "Monsieur Mathieu," Thomas greeted in his distinctive Corsican French, "c'est un plaisir de vous rencontrer en personne." The elderly man's eyebrows rose in surprise at Thomas's accent, but his response came rapid-fire in an even thicker version of the dialect. Ella caught every word, noting the subtle regional idioms he deliberately inserted. "He says he's surprised you speak his language, but wonders if you understand it well enough for business," Ella translated smoothly. "He also made a joke about Americans thinking they can buy culture along with everything else." Thomas's lips twitched. He responded in French, maintaining the formal business tone while Elle observed the dynamics developing. Jean-Claude clearly respected Thomas's attempt to speak his language, but was testing boundaries. Philippe remained quiet but watchful, occasionally whispering to his grandfather. As the meeting progressed, Elle found herself doing more than translating. She began catching nuances in Jean-Claude's tone, alerting Thomas with subtle gestures when the old man seemed dissatisfied, or when Philippe's whispers contradicted his grandfather's statements. During a particularly tense moment regarding access rights to the main Bonifacio port, Elle noticed Jean-Claude using a specific metaphor about fishing nets that carried cultural significance Thomas couldn't possibly understand. "May I?" she murmured to Thomas, who nodded slightly. Elle addressed Jean-Claude directly in his dialect, referencing an old Corsican proverb about shared waters and mutual respect. The old man's eyes widened, then crinkled with genuine pleasure. He responded warmly, his entire demeanor shifting. "What did you say?" Thomas whispered, as Jean-Claude conversed with Philippe. "I suggested a compromise, using cultural context he values," Elle explained quickly. "He's more concerned with respect for tradition than the financial terms." Thomas nodded thoughtfully, then adjusted his approach. By the end of the lunch, they had the framework of an agreement that satisfied both parties, with Jean-Claude visibly impressed by the young American woman who spoke his language as if born to it. As they prepared to leave, Jean-Claude took Elle's hand. "Vous êtes un trésor rare, mademoiselle," he said warmly. "Monsieur Blackwell est chanceux de vous avoir trouvé." Elle thanked him graciously, but noticed Philippe watching her with calculation in his eyes that made her uneasy. "That was remarkable," Thomas said once they were alone in the limousine. "You didn't just translate. You understood cultural implications I would have missed entirely." Elle felt a flush of pride. Language isn't just words, it's context, history, relationships. "I've had professional negotiators who couldn't read a room half as well," Thomas continued, genuine admiration in his voice. "You have a natural talent for this." Their eyes met, and Elle felt a spark of connection that went beyond professional appreciation. For a moment, neither spoke. Thomas's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. His expression darkened as he checked the screen. "Veronica," he muttered, "I need to take this." While Thomas spoke quietly into his phone, Elle gazed out at the New York streets, trying to process everything that had happened. In just a week, her life had transformed completely. The financial pressures crushing her for years had eased, and for the first time since her mother's illness, she felt her talents truly valued. Yet there was something else developing, an undeniable attraction to Thomas that both thrilled and terrified her. He was her employer, vastly wealthy, recently divorced, and carrying emotional baggage she could only begin to guess at. "I apologize for that," Thomas said, ending his call. His expression was guarded in a way Elle hadn't seen since their first meeting. "Veronica has a talent for complicating matters." "Ex-wives often do," Elle replied lightly, trying to ease the tension. Thomas's laugh held little humor, especially when they're still on the company board and hold significant share voting rights. Back at the hotel, Thomas invited Elle to dinner to celebrate their successful meeting, but she politely declined, needing time to gather her thoughts. Alone in her suite, she called Jamie to share the good news about the meeting, still keeping the details vague. As she prepared for bed, her phone pinged with a message from an unknown number. "You're in over your head, little waitress. Walk away while you can." Ella stared at the message, a chill running through her. She started to call Thomas, then hesitated, unsure if she was overreacting. Instead, she took a screenshot and tried to push the unsettling warning from her mind. The next morning, Thomas suggested they remain in New York for the weekend to prepare for follow-up negotiations on Monday. They spent Saturday in Central Park and visiting museums, their conversation flowing easily between business and personal topics. Ella found herself sharing stories about her mother and brother, while Thomas spoke of his early years building his company. "What about your time in Corsica?" she asked, as they strolled through the Metropolitan Museum. "You mentioned learning French there, but not why you were there in the first place." Thomas was quiet for so long that Ella thought he might not answer. "My parents were complicated people," he finally said. "When I was 14, they were going through a particularly volatile period in their marriage. They sent me to stay with a business associate in Corsica for what was supposed to be a summer. It turned into a year. That must have been difficult," Ella said softly. "It was the best year of my childhood," Thomas replied, surprising her. "Madame Beaumont, my tutor, showed me kindness I'd never experienced. The language, the culture, it became a refuge." The vulnerability in his voice touched something in Elle. Impulsively, she reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. To her surprise, Thomas didn't pull away, instead interlacing his fingers with hers as they continued through the gallery. Neither acknowledged the gesture verbally, but something had shifted between them. A boundary crossed, a connection deepened. Sunday morning, Elle woke to another text message. Last warning. He'll destroy you like all the others. This time, the message included a link to a news article from 2 years ago about a female executive at Blackwell International who had resigned suddenly amidst rumors of an inappropriate relationship with the CEO. As Ella read the article, a knock came at her door. She opened it to find not Thomas but Veronica Blackwell herself, elegant and imposing in a designer suit despite the early hour. "Miss Jackson," she said with a cold smile, "I think it's time we had a conversation about my ex-husband and the pattern you're unwittingly becoming part of." "May I come in?" Veronica asked, though her tone made it clear she wasn't really asking. She swept into Elle's suite without waiting for a response, her critical gaze taking in every detail. Elle closed the door, heart pounding. "How did you find me?" "Please," Veronica scoffed, settling onto the sofa. "Thomas may own this hotel, but I have friends everywhere." She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Sit. This won't take long." Reluctantly, Elle sat, acutely aware of the disparity between them. Veronica in her perfect Saint Laurent suit, herself in hotel pajamas with uncombed hair. "You're not the first, you know," Veronica began, her voice clinically detached. "Thomas has a pattern. He finds vulnerable young women with some special talent, promises to change their lives, makes them dependent on him, and then," she waved a manicured hand, "once the challenge is gone, so is his interest. I'm his translator, not his girlfriend," Ella countered, though the hand-holding in the museum flashed through her mind. Veronica's laugh was brittle. "That's how it always begins. Amanda Chen was his architectural consultant. Before her, Natalie Parker was his PR specialist. I have a whole list." She pulled out her phone and showed Elle a spreadsheet with dates, names, and outcomes. None lasted more than 3 months. Most ended their careers in shambles. Elle scanned the list, her stomach tightening. "Why are you showing me this?" "Professional courtesy," Veronica replied. "Woman to woman. Thomas isn't evil. He's damaged. He builds people up, becomes emotionally invested, then panics and withdraws completely when things get too real." Her perfect facade cracked slightly, revealing genuine emotion. "I spent 12 years trying to fix him. Take my advice. Cash whatever checks he's written and walk away now." "You're still in love with him," Ella realized aloud. Veronica's expression hardened. "What I feel is irrelevant. What matters is protecting Blackwell International from his self-destructive patterns. The board is losing patience with his personal distractions. I'm a distraction now. You're a waitress with no business credentials who's suddenly negotiating multi-billion-dollar international deals and spending weekends with the CEO. What would you call it?" The sharp words stung because they reflected Elle's own insecurities. Before she could respond, her phone rang. "Thomas, don't tell him I'm here," Veronica warned. Elle hesitated, then answered, "Good morning." "Elle," Thomas sounded unusually energetic. "I've had an idea about the Mathieu negotiation. Can you meet me for breakfast?" "I need about an hour," Elle replied, watching Veronica. "Perfect. The hotel restaurant at 9. He paused. "Is everything all right? You sound tense." "Just woke up," Ella lied. "See you at 9. After hanging up, Elle faced Veronica again. "You've said your piece. Now I'd like you to leave." Veronica stood, smoothing her already perfect outfit. "He'll break your heart, Gabriel. It's what he does." At the door, she turned back. "Oh, and don't bother telling him about this visit. He'll just accuse you of being paranoid or manipulated by me. That's his pattern too." After Veronica left, Elle sat motionless, her mind racing. The spreadsheet, the warning texts, the article, they painted a damning picture. Yet they contradicted the Thomas she was coming to know, the man who spoke of Madame Beaumont with such tenderness, who'd noticed Elle's understanding when no one else had for decades. At breakfast, Thomas was animated, outlining a new approach to the Mathieu negotiations. Ella participated mechanically, distracted by Veronica's warnings. "You're not listening," Thomas finally said, setting down his coffee. "What's wrong?" Ella met his gaze directly. "I received some disturbing messages." "And a visit from Veronica this morning." Thomas went still, his expression closing off exactly as Veronica had predicted. "What did she want?" "To warn me about you. She showed me a list of women. Amanda Chen, Natalie Parker, others. She says you have a pattern." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Of course she did." And now you're questioning everything, wouldn't you? Ella challenged. I've gone from struggling waitress to international business consultant in a week. It doesn't make sense, Thomas. He was quiet for a long moment, control evident in every line of his body. When he spoke, his voice was measured. Veronica believes I have a savior complex because of my childhood. Perhaps she's right, but that doesn't make what's happening between us now any less real. And what exactly is happening between us? Ella pressed. Am I an employee, a project, something else? I don't know, he admitted, surprising her with his candor. I know I value your skills. I know I enjoy your company more than anyone's in recent memory. I know something happened when you understood my French that morning, something I can't quite define. His honesty disarmed her. Ella leaned forward. The women on Veronica's list, what really happened to them? Thomas sighed. They were talented individuals I tried to mentor. Some relationships became complicated. Most moved on to successful positions elsewhere, though Veronica would never acknowledge that. And Amanda Chen. The article suggested Amanda was brilliant but ultimately asked to be reassigned after... He hesitated. After I couldn't return her feelings. She now runs our Singapore office. Before Elle could respond, Thomas's phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then stood. I have to go. There's an emergency board meeting Veronica's called. Apparently, my professional judgment is being questioned. His smile was grim. We'll continue this conversation later. Elle spent the day in turmoil, researching the women on Veronica's list. Some had indeed vanished professionally, but others, like Amanda Chen, held prestigious positions at major companies, including Blackwell International. The picture was more complex than Veronica had painted. That evening, a knock came at her door. Elle opened it to find not Thomas or Veronica, but Philippe Mathieu, Jean-Claude's grandson. Mademoiselle Jackson, he greeted in French. May we speak? Cautiously, Elle invited him in. Philippe declined to sit, remaining standing with a curious intensity. My grandfather was impressed by you, he began. So impressed that he had me investigate how an American waitress came to speak our specific dialect so perfectly. Ella tensed. And? Your mother worked for Professor Hughes, the linguist. This much is true, but there is more, yes? A connection you yourself may not know. Ella's mouth went dry. What are you talking about? Philippe pulled out an old photograph. Your mother visited Corsica 25 years ago with Professor Hughes for his research. While there, she spent considerable time with Madame Beaumont, the same woman who taught Thomas Blackwell. Ella stared at the photo, her mother much younger standing beside an elegant elderly woman in front of a stone cottage. That's why you understand the dialect, Philippe continued. Your mother learned from Madame Beaumont just as Thomas did. You've been speaking her particular variant all your life. The revelation stunned Elle. Her mother had never mentioned visiting Corsica, yet here was proof. Why are you telling me this? Philippe's expression softened. Because my grandfather believes in signs and connections. He says two people learning the same rare dialect from the same teacher, across time and continents, then finding each other by chance. This is not coincidence, but destiny. When Philippe left, Elle sat with the photograph, memories shifting and realigning. Her mother had always been evasive about where she'd learned French, attributing it vaguely to traveling in my youth. Now a new possibility emerged. Had her mother known Thomas? Had their meeting at the restaurant truly been chance? Ella was still contemplating these questions when another knock came. This time it was Thomas, looking exhausted, but resolved. The board meeting, she asked, letting him in. Veronica moved to have me temporarily removed as CEO, citing erratic decision-making and personal distractions. His laugh was hollow. She failed, but only narrowly. My position is precarious. Because of me, Elle stated. Because of me, Thomas corrected. My choices. But yes, our association has given Veronica ammunition. He noticed the photograph on the coffee table. What's this? Elle explained Philippe's visit and the revelation about Madame Beaumont. Thomas listened with growing astonishment. Your mother was Laura Jackson, he asked, studying the photo more closely. I remember her. She was kind to me, helped me practice English when Professor Hughes visited. He looked up at Ella, wonderment in his eyes. You have her smile. How did I not see it before? The connection between them, already significant, deepened with this shared history. They talked for hours, piecing together the remarkable coincidences that had brought them together. As dawn approached, Thomas finally addressed the question hanging between them. "What Veronica said about me, there's some truth to it. I do get intensely invested in people, then withdraw when things get complicated. It's a defense mechanism from childhood that I've never fully overcome." "And us?" Ella asked softly. "Is that what this is?" Thomas took her hand, his expression more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. "I don't think so. This feels different." He hesitated. "The board has suggested I take a sabbatical, step back from daily operations while they evaluate my leadership." "I'm sorry," Ella said, genuinely concerned. "Don't be. I'm thinking of accepting." Thomas's eyes held hers steadily. "There's a cottage in Bonifacio I've owned for years but rarely visit. Madame Beaumont's old home, actually. I've been too busy building empires to appreciate what truly matters." Elle's heart raced as she understood what he was suggesting. "And you want me to—" "Come with me," he said simply. "Not as my translator or consultant, as my companion. Let's explore whatever this is between us without the complications of board meetings and corporate politics." "People will talk," Elle pointed out. "I'll be the waitress who seduced the billionaire." Thomas smiled. "Let them talk. I've spent my life worrying about what people think, and where has it gotten me? A failed marriage, a tenuous grip on a company that consumes me, and not a single person who understands my accent." Ella laughed at that, the tension breaking. "Well, when you put it that way, I'm not promising forever," Thomas cautioned. "I don't know if I'm capable of that yet. But I'm promising honesty and a genuine attempt to not repeat old patterns." Elle considered everything: the whirlwind week, Veronica's warnings, Philippe's revelations, and the undeniable connection she felt with Thomas. She thought of her mother, who had always encouraged her to follow unexpected paths. "Bonifacio is beautiful in the spring, I hear," she finally said. Thomas's smile was radiant. "Even more beautiful when you understand the language." 6 months later, Ella stood on the terrace of the stone cottage, watching the Mediterranean glisten in the afternoon sun. Inside, Thomas was on a video call with the Blackwell International Board, who had reluctantly acknowledged that the company was running smoothly under interim leadership. Their time in Corsica had transformed them both. Thomas had rediscovered joy in simple pleasures, while Elle had found confidence in her unique abilities, starting a small translation business serving local enterprises. Their relationship had deepened into something neither had expected, a partnership of equals, built on mutual understanding and shared history. Jean-Claude Mathieu had become a regular visitor, delighting in speaking his dialect with them and sharing stories of Madame Beaumont. Veronica had eventually ceased her opposition, focusing instead on her own career advancement. As for Jamie, he was thriving in his university program, his future secure thanks to a foundation Thomas and Ella had established for students of linguistics and international relations. Ella felt Thomas's arms encircle her waist from behind. "The board wants me back," he murmured against her hair. "And what do you want?" she asked, turning to face him. "To build something new," he replied. "A life that balances purpose with joy. A foundation that honors Madame Beaumont's legacy of connecting cultures through language." He kissed her softly. "With you, if you're willing." Ella smiled, thinking of the unlikely journey that had brought them here. From a restaurant corner where a billionaire's French had gone uncomprehended, to this moment of perfect understanding. "Je suis prête pour cette aventure," she answered in the distinctive dialect they both loved. Ensemble. Together they watched the sun begin its descent toward the horizon, their shared language bridging past and present, creating a future neither could have imagined alone.